An acting troupe comes aboard the Enterprise and their lead actor has some folks wondering if there's more to this guy than meets the eye. Is he just an actor trying to make a living touring the galaxy, bringing Shakespeare to the worlds of the Federation, or is he hiding something much, much darker? Kirk suspects the latter, but he better be careful because those who could prove it are mysteriously dropping like flies, and he just might be the next one to go. This episode is the thing wherein we'll catch the conscience of the king. Hit it! Hey! So we got two major guest stars in this episode. The first one is Arnold Moss as Anton Karidian. I really like him in this episode, and when I looked him up, I was kind of astonished he wasn't in more stuff. He was no stranger to sci-fi, though, and appeared in episodes of Time Tunnel, The Man and/or Girl from U.N.C.L.E., The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, and the movie The 27th Day. He also appeared in a civil defense short about planning a community fallout shelter, which also starred Gene Hackman, which now I gotta see it. The other major guest star is Barbara Anderson as Lenore Karidian. She did the usual guest star circuit, Police Story, Love Boat, Hawaii Five-0, Mission Impossible, where she was in an episode with William Shatner, but by far her largest role was 105 episodes of Ironside as Officer Eve Whitfield. A couple of smaller roles, you got William Sargent as Dr. Layton, Natalie Norwick, who is not only playing Dr. Layton's wife Martha, but is also William Sargent's actual wife. And let's see, who am I forgetting here? Oh yeah, Bruce Hyde is back as Kevin Riley. Can't say enough about this kid. I so wish they had made him a regular. He's a little more serious in this one than his appearance in The Naked Time, and yeah, I know, the milk, we'll get to that. But it's still good to see him on the Enterprise again. Strangely enough, he really didn't do much television. 1966 was his only really active year. He ended up chairing the theater department at St. Cloud University in Minnesota, though, and he does make one more appearance in Star Trek lore, but you have to have ridden the Star Trek The Experience ride in Las Vegas to have seen him. But, as they say, the show must go on, so let's get into the plot. We open with a guy stabbing another guy, and it turns out we're at a production of Macbeth on a planet we later find out is just called Q. Playing Macbeth is actor Anton Karidian, and in the audience, Kirk is sitting next to a guy who leans over and tells him to pay attention to Karidian. Kirk is a little confused until his buddy, Dr. Thomas Layton, tells him that he suspects that Karidian is actually Kodos the Executioner. We don't know what that means, but it's apparently enough on its own to be our cold open. Well, after the credits, we find out that Kodos led a coup that took over the Earth colony on TOS 4 during a famine. And because there wasn't enough food to feed the population of 8,000, and the supply ship was going to be too late to get more food to the colony before everybody starved, he made the decision to execute half of the population so that the other half would live. Among that other half was young Thomas Layton and a young James T. Kirk. Also, the supply ship showed up early, and it turns out he didn't need to grease all them people. Oops. Well, among the 4,000 survivors, only 9 saw Kodos in person, and Layton and Kirk are among them. We also see the reason why Dr. Layton has been really careful not to let the camera guy see the left side of his head up to this point. It's because the left side of his head fell off, and he's got it covered with what looks like part of a black throw pillow. It ain't clear if Kodos had anything to do with that, but that's kind of what's implied, and if it's true, this guy is understandably pissed. Anyways, Layton says he's going to have a cocktail party at his place for the theater company so he can meet Karidian and see for himself. Kirk says that Kodos is officially dead, and that's good enough for him. Layton says they never identified the body because it was burned too badly, but Kirk says no thanks, he's going back to the ship. But back on the ship, this whole thing has got him thinking. So he consults the computer to try to figure out if Layton is right. He finds out that Karidian's records start right about the same time Kodos died, and they do look a lot like one another. It ain't conclusive, but it is enough that Kirk decides to go to the cocktail party after all. Well, it turns out Karidian don't do cocktail parties, so he ain't there. But who is there is his daughter Lenore, and Kirk hits on her immediately. Kirk's got a Kirk, you know? Well, they decide to blow off the cocktail party and take a walk in the moonlight. And that's where they find Layton's murdered-ass body. Well, that makes our boy think, you know, maybe there's something to this. So Kirk finds out that the Astral Queen is set to pick up the Karidian company and take them to their next engagement. He calls up the Astral Queen's captain and calls in a favor, telling them to cancel on the company so he can pick them up. And as expected, Lenore Karidian shows up and asks Kirk if he can take them to their next destination since that other ship bailed on them, and Kirk thinks to himself, I love it when a plan comes together. Kirk does some more Google searching and discovers that not only is he and Layton on that list of people who can ID Kodos, but so is Lieutenant Kevin Riley. He tells Spock to assign Riley to engineering, presumably so that he's isolated and protected, but he don't let on. Spock says he just got promoted out of there. He's going to think he did something wrong. Kirk says he don't care, just do it, and don't ask questions. Spock says, all right, that's it, and he goes and talks to McCoy. McCoy says, Kirk's a weird guy. He once told me I should give some wheat from out in the yard to my ex-girlfriend. Who knows what that guy? Spock says, okay, yeah, that is weird, but get this. I did a Google for stuff that involved Kirk, Layton, and Riley, and figured out that these guys are a part of a list of 9 people who have seen this dude, Kodos the Executioner, and could ID him. And out of that 9 people, 6 are dead. Well, 7 now because Phantom of the Sofa got whacked back there. And you know what? Whenever one of these Mamalukes bought it, the Karidian company was somewheres close. Cut to our boy Kevin covering the night shift in engineering. He's got his dinner there, a plate of delicious future food, and a glass of milk. See, kids? Future Star Trek people drink milk, so what's your problem? Well, feeling a little FOMO, he calls up to the rec room to see what's going on up there. Lieutenant Who Gives a Rat's Ass over here goes, hey, Kev, we're all having fun up here, buddy. Uhura's noodling around on a Vulcan lyre she got from Etsy, while Ed from the biolab is weirdly standing over her doing a Captain Morgan kind of thing. Ensign Horace is playing some Gallagher over there. The Knutson twins are over here playing some 3D checkers. We're all having a blast up here. Where the hell are you? I'm stuck down here in the ass end of space. That's where I am. Well, who did you piss off? Did you call Scotty a thistle-assed orangutan again? You know you're not really Irish, right? You're from Cincinnati. No, seriously, I have no idea what I did. Hey, can you get Uhura to do a song for me? Sure, what do you want to hear? Don't say it. What? I wasn't going to say Kathleen, I swear. I don't even like that song anymore. Yeah, whatever, William Hung. You're lucky they let you back into that room in the first place. I'm going to let Uhura pick something you don't know the words to, all right? Well, Uhura sings Beyond Antares, which is pretty damn good. While this is going on, though, a ninja comes in and sprays some Ajax or something in Kevin's milk. Then, while listening to the song, Kevin contemplates the pros and cons of drinking his milk, and after an unusually long struggle with the choice, ends up drinking it. Well, then he keels over.
He chose poorly.
Well, with the gang in the rec room hearing the trouble, and the fact that McCoy is a badass at doctoring, Riley looks like he's going to pull through. Spock notes that if he dies, Kirk is the only one left on the list, and that means he's pretty much toast. McCoy says, we don't know that this was an attempt to murder Riley. He was poisoned with this lubricant that they use all over the place down there in engineering. Could be an accident. Spock is like, you have got to be kidding me. Well, they go and talk to Kirk about it, and Spock says Karidian is Kodos. That's pretty obvious. Kirk says he has to be sure. Spock is like, what is with you people? Well, later, when Spock is trying again to whet Kirk's almost blunted purpose and convince him that he's right about Kodos, they hear a phaser set to overload somewhere in Kirk's quarters. Spock runs out to clear the deck of personnel, and Kirk looks for the phaser. He finds it in the red alert lamp and flushes it out of the ship just before it blows. Somehow this still doesn't remove all doubt in Kirk's mind, but he decides it's time to go and confront Karidian. He busts into Karidian's quarters and asks him if he's Kodos. Brilliant strategy. Why didn't he think of this sooner? Karidian is pretty evasive about it though, doing a lot of if I was then yada 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 stuff. But Kirk gets Karidian to read a statement that is a transcript from a speech that Kodos made condemning the 4000 on Tarsus 4 to death to the computer, which will compare it to a voice print from the original. They come back a match, But it ain't a perfect match, and it's not enough for Kirk yet. Spock contemplates taking up drinking. Well, the Karidian company puts on a production of Hamlet for the crew. McCoy is finishing up his log entry about Riley just before heading to the ship's theater. In it, he mentions that the current suspect in what happened with Riley is Karidian, who is probably Kodos in disguise. Riley overhears this and sneaks out of sickbay, grabs a phaser, and heads to the theater. Kirk is backstage watching Karidian in secret when Sean Wilkes O'Booth over here shows up to kill the guy. Kirk manages to talk him down, but Karidian overhears the conversation. Riley exits stage potato. Am I going overboard with this Irish thing? I'm having way too much fun with this. Anyways, Kirk stays hidden while Lenore comes off stage and asks Karidian what's bothering him. He says he overheard something that reminded him of a part he played long ago, thinking she don't know about the whole Kodos thing. But she says she knows all about it, and it's okay, and she's been greasing people who can ID him so he can live in peace at last. Ain't that sweet? And it ain't even Father's Day or nothing. Well, Karidian freaks out, saying he wanted to keep her separate from this whole thing, and now she's just put more blood on his hands. But she says she's just silencing the ghosts, but he says she's taken everything good away from him. Kirk finally seems ready to start thinking about making a decision on whether Karidian is Kodos or not, and he steps out of the shadows. Lenore is in full-on crazy balls mode, and Kirk summons security. Lenore snatches one of their phasers and aims it at Kirk, and as she fires, Karidian jumps in front of the beam and gets killed. This sends Lenore completely into cuckoo land, and they lead her off to get fitted for one of those giant thumb Tantalus jumpsuits. In the epilogue, we learn from McCoy that Lenore still thinks her father is out there giving performances and is going to enjoy her padded cell and all-pudding diet. He says to Kirk, "You really care for her, huh?" Kirk just looks at him and tells Lieutenant Leslie to break orbit. And we roll credits. Great stuff. With Shakespeare all over this thing, there were some really great lines in this episode. I can't put them all in here, but here's some of my favorites.
Someone tried to kill him. Could have been an accident. You should be told the difference between empiricism and stubbornness, Doctor.
That nothing is proven.
Even in this corner of the galaxy, Captain, 2 + 2 = 4. Almost certainly an attempt will be made to kill you. Why do you invite death?
A great twofer from Spock here. A lot is made in Star Trek of the human ability to leap beyond logic with intuition or what have you, but this is a rare example of human emotion being shown as a kind of detriment, with the purely logical Spock frustrated as hell that Kirk and even McCoy remain unconvinced that Karidian is Kodos despite overwhelming evidence that he is. Well, there's a reason that's the case, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
What if you decide he is Kodos? What then? Do you play God, carry his head through the corridors in triumph? That won't bring back the dead, Jim.
No. But they may rest easier.
Now, we'll talk more about the larger matter this is addressing later, but I do like that these kinds of conversations are always between Kirk and McCoy. I've talked a lot before about McCoy and the purpose he serves in the show. He's the unabashed human perspective, but he can also be the conscience of the captain, to borrow a phrase.
A long history of medicine. No doctor has ever caught the first few minutes of a play. Riley, don't forget to...
Another one of those lines that makes McCoy the most genuine character in the show. Every character gets their moments from time to time where they show a real relatability, but practically every time Bones opens his mouth, there's this relatable authenticity there that makes him probably my favorite character in all of Star Trek.
I'll be back, though it takes forever. Forever is just a day.
I love it when Uhura gets to sing. That song was written for this episode with Star Trek music consultant Wilbur Hatch doing the music and producer Gene Kuhn doing the lyrics. Good stuff.
I'm an actor. I play many parts.
You're an actor now. What were you 20 years ago?
Younger, Captain. Much younger.
I can't put the whole conversation between Kirk and Karidian in here for obvious reasons, but this whole exchange is really good. Arnold Moss is really mesmerizing as Karidian, and it's a shock to me that he wasn't a better-known actor back in the day. He did a lot of stuff, to be sure, and he had a career he was no doubt satisfied with, but this guy should still really be a famous name, like Christopher Lee or Christopher Plummer, one of those kind of guys. And Arnie was from Brooklyn. Who knew?
And the ship. All this power surging and throbbing, yet under control. Are you like that, Captain?
Moving on. A great little detail here that any of you that have ever been a part of a theatrical production will appreciate. They're using real theatrical flats for the set in Hamlet. We've got warp drive and transporters, but the TD is still making 4x8s with keystones and corner blocks. You love to see it. The Goof. Okay, so first up, how long does it take for Riley to take a drink of milk? Is this where we get the term milking it? I bet it is. You gotta be kidding me with this. Now, don't get me wrong, I like this episode a lot. I really do. But there are some premises in this thing that do deserve to be called out. First off, if all this stuff happened 20 years ago, Riley was what, 4? I mean, if he was and Kodos was responsible for killing his family, I'd understand that he was still cheesed off about it and want to kill Kodos, but I don't think I'd have him on that list of reliable eyewitnesses that could positively identify Kodos, Even Kirk's age kind of comes into question here. There's a scene in the script that didn't get filmed that said that Kirk was a midshipman in the academy and had just been assigned to Tarsus 4 when all of this went down. Well, that makes him at the very youngest 18 at the time, but they're not going to put a midshipman in the field until his 3rd or 4th year, surely. So he'd be 20 or 22 years old, which would make him 40 to 42 years old at the time of the episode. We do get his age later on in the series, but I don't think anyone was assuming Kirk was older than his mid-30s up to this point. And for reference, William Shatner was 35 when they filmed this. And what about that whole 9 people can identify Kodos thing? Does it seem like that's even remotely relevant when you can pull up a color photo of the guy on any Starfleet library computer? They have his picture, they have his voice print, presumably they have his DNA, but the show gets a pass on that one because, yeah, it's about the 23rd century, but it was still made in 1966, and they didn't know from DNA evidence back then. But they've got like every other thing on this Kodos guy. What good are these eyewitnesses? And if everybody's been thinking he's dead for 20 years, why call attention to yourself by killing these witnesses? It's been 20 years. He got away. The only reason Leighton fingered Karidian for being Kodos is because Lenore purposefully booked a performance where this guy was going to show up. If she knew where all these people were, wouldn't it have been at least as simple to avoid these 9 friggin' people in the galaxy as it was to seek each one of them out and murder them? I know, then we don't get a show, but still, what the hell? And they never elaborate on why these 9 people saw Kodos and no one else did. I'd love to hear how Leighton, however old he was, a 20-year-old Kirk, and an orphaned toddler named Kevin Riley ended up in the same room with friggin' Thanos over here. I'm sure there's a book somewhere about it. There's always a friggin' book. If there was a throwaway line in an episode, some putz has written a book outlining the whole backstory of it. There's some weird Star Trek books out there. Now again, I do like this episode, but the plot don't really stand up to too much scrutiny, Ruminations. A couple of interesting notes about this episode. One, we finally have a name for Eddie Paskey's character.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Leslie.
Leaving orbit, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Leslie. The name is an homage to Shatner's eldest daughter. Eddie's kind of been an unofficial mascot of our little show here. I love playing Spot the Paskey when I'm watching the original series. For those who don't know, he's Shatner's body double when needed, he's hand doubled for James Doohan a couple of times, and otherwise just kind of hangs out on the set in a red shirt, usually in the background. He don't get a lot of lines. It's one of those things that once you know about it, you start noticing him everywhere. Also, we established that whenever there's dimmer mood lighting on the Enterprise, that's because it's nighttime. They adjust the lights to simulate day and night. This is the only episode they mention it in, though, so who knows if they actually use it again on purpose. We also get our first mention of the shuttlecraft in this episode, which I'm sure Sulu has some questions about, but we don't get a look at it until the next episode. But Kirk and Lenore are looking at it from an observation deck, and that's brand new. And it's the only time in the series we see it. It's referenced in Journey to Babel, but it's never used as a location again, which is weird. After a sideways reference to it and what our little girl's made of, we get our first real glimpse of Star Trek's intention to address the matter of eugenics. Spock brings it up when referencing Kodos' method of choosing who lives and who dies.
Kodos began to separate the colonists. Some would live, be rationed whatever food was left. The remainder would be immediately put to death. Apparently, he had his own theories of eugenics.
Unfortunately, he wasn't the first.
Perhaps not.
Now, we know that the eugenics wars won't be established until later in the series, but it's interesting that it's come up now a couple of times in the series so far. I mean, it's not all that surprising, I guess, since World War II was only 20 years ago at this point, which, of course, is how long ago the Kodos thing happened too, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I like that Space Seed is kind of unintentionally being foreshadowed here and there in the series leading up to it. Now, unfortunately, this quick cameo here is the final appearance of Yeoman Janice Rand until Star Trek The Motion Picture. She actually knew she had been fired from the show at this point, which may have helped motivate that look she gives Lenore here. Now, a lot has been said regarding why she was let go from the show, and we won't get into it here because there's nothing funny about it at all, but you should look it up if you can. And if you want to hear it straight from the source, Grace Lee Whitney's book, The Longest Trek, My Tour of the Galaxy, is highly recommended. She only appeared in 8 episodes, 8 out of 79, and still a lot of Trekkies, including myself, think of her as one of the central cast. She was a fan favorite at the time too, but the tragedy there was she was already fired by the time the first episode of Star Trek aired. So they had no idea how popular she would be before they fired her. Who knows if she even wanted to stick around considering things, but still, it would have been nice if she had had the choice. So the episode doesn't really have an explicit message per se. There is certainly a debate to be had about the whole justice versus vengeance thing, but the episode doesn't really take a stance one way or the other on that. And considering the world of Star Trek, what would justice look like here? McCoy talks about parading Kodos' head around, and I don't think he means that literally, but honestly the best Kirk and Riley can hope for is Kodos being in a booby hatch on Tantalus next to his daughter. Now, we don't find out until the menagerie, but the Federation only has the death penalty for one crime, and that's going to Talos 4. And also, M5 mentions it as punishment for murder in the Ultimate Computer, but I don't think we're supposed to talk about that. Also, I know Tantalus ain't the only penal colony out there, but it's the only one we've heard of, so that's the one we're going with. But it's been 20 years, and Karidian seems to have left Kodos behind for good. I mean, Cuckoo Pants' daughter notwithstanding, Kodos is more or less dead. Like McCoy says, putting Karidian and Tantalus ain't going to bring those people back. Kirk says they may rest easier, but that's kind of dramatic nonsense. They're dead. So maybe revenge is what Kirk is after. It's certainly what Riley was after. It's definitely something that inspires discussion, and I like that. That's what science fiction is supposed to do, you know? And finally, just a note to say how much I love the parallels between this episode and Hamlet. You got Kirk in the role of the Prince of Denmark himself. He's being spurred towards revenge for those 4,000 people, with Leighton and Spock in the role of King Hamlet's ghost, but endlessly hobbled by his own doubts and inaction, always needing more proof that Karidian is Kodos, when, as Spock says, 2 + 2 = 4 a long time ago. And you got Lenore definitely wearing her Ophelia jeans, particularly at the end. Thankfully, there wasn't a river around for her to fall into. It was a great way to parallel the story centered around a Shakespearean theater company. Despite my many issues with the plot of this episode, I still really like this one. The performances are great, and just the theatricality of it all just resonates with me. Probably because your possum here has been known to tread the boards from time to time, and he's no stranger to Billy Shakes. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. Also, he was a Jets fan. Poor guy never caught a break. Huh? So there you have it, the conscience of the king. What did you think of this episode? Let me know down there in the comments. Also, do you have a question for the possum? Send them to me at accidentallyderivative@gmail.com, or you can fill out and submit the form that's linked in the description. Ask me anything, what I think about different shows or movies or books, or some other stuff, like stuff about my process here or something like that. Whatever you want. Yeah, don't get too weird with it though. When I get enough questions, I'll do a Q&A episode. And this goes for whenever you're watching this video. If the video is up, the lines are open. Do you like Babylon 5 and or The Expanse? Or do you just want to help support the channel? Well, hit that join button down there and you'll get way early access to my episode commentary tracks for them 2 shows and first crack at any other new experimental stuff I might come up with. I got some ideas rolling around, maybe something behind the scenes, maybe something where I play a video game or something. I never got very far with that missed sequel Ribbon, so I may take another crack at it and invite you guys along for the ride. Channel membership gets you first access to all that stuff. Or if you're more of a one-time kind of person, that thanks button will throw some quatloos in the tip jar. Maybe I can get a dirty water dog. But anything at all you can do to help the channel, even if it's just liking and subscribing, it's all hugely appreciated. You guys are the best. Next episode, Spock gets his first command when he takes 7 people on board the shuttlecraft Galileo, and they encounter a bunch of giant murder monkeys. Does the purely logical Vulcan have what it takes to be an effective commander in such a dire situation? We'll find out in the Galileo 7. Until then, possum friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, alright? Later.